You trip on a flat sidewalk. Nobody laughs. Nobody even turns their head. And yet for the rest of the walk, you feel like you're wearing a sign. You replay it. You wonder who saw. You half expect a stranger to bring it up. Meanwhile, the actual people around you forgot it before you'd taken 3 more steps. This isn't a coincidence, and it isn't because you're especially self-conscious. It's because you are living inside the one mind in the world that has full access to every mistake you've ever made. And everyone else is only getting a passing glance at a tiny fraction of them. That asymmetry is so basic that it's easy to miss. And once you see it, it explains an enormous amount of unnecessary suffering. In the year 2000, psychologists Thomas Gilovich, Victoria Medvec, and Kenneth Savitsky ran an experiment that has since become one of the most cited findings in social psychology. They had a student put on a t-shirt featuring a large image of a musician most people at the time would find mildly embarrassing, then walk into a room full of peers. Afterward, the student guessed that roughly half the room would remember what was on the shirt. The real number was closer to 1 in 4. Not because the room wasn't looking, because the room had its own life going on inside its head. And your shirt, however loud, was competing with everyone else's version of the exact anxiety you were feeling about yours. Gilovich and his colleagues called this the spotlight effect, and the name is almost too accurate. You genuinely experience your own mistakes as if a spotlight is on you, because from the inside, that's exactly what it feels like. Every blunder you make arrives with the full weight of your entire awareness attached to it. There's no discount, no distance, no competing information drowning it out. It's the loudest thing in the room, because it's the only thing your mind is required to process in full detail. But here's where it gets more interesting than simple self-consciousness. The people around you aren't failing to notice your mistake because they're unobservant. They're failing to notice it because they're standing in their own spotlight, and it's currently pointed at something entirely different, usually themselves. The colleague who barely registered your stumble over a word in the meeting was almost certainly replaying their own stumble from earlier that morning. The stranger who didn't remember your shirt was busy wondering whether anyone noticed the coffee stain on theirs. You assume you're the exception to a rule that everyone is actually following at the same time, which means the spotlight you feel isn't shared. It's private, running independently in every single head in the room, each person convinced theirs is the one everyone else can see. This gets stranger once you look at what's actually happening inside your skull versus what's visible on the outside. Researchers studying this same research group found a related effect they called the illusion of transparency. The belief that your internal state, your nervousness, your embarrassment, your panic about the mistake you just made, is far more visible on your face and in your voice than it actually is. In one study, people asked to conceal a strong emotion consistently believed observers could read it clearly. Observers, when actually asked, mostly couldn't. The feeling of being obviously flustered and the reality of appearing mildly distracted are 2 completely different experiences. And you only ever have access to the first one, because you're the only person who can feel your own heart rate rising. Put those 2 findings together, and you get a fairly precise account of why a small error can feel catastrophic in the moment it happens. Not only do you believe everyone noticed the mistake itself, you also believe they can see exactly how rattled it made you, which means, in your head, the error and your reaction to the error are both fully exposed, doubling the perceived audience for something that, from the outside, barely registered as an event at all. Why would a mind evolve to work this way? The likely answer traces back to something you've probably already sensed if you've thought about your own reputation before, which is that social standing used to be survival critical. In a small tribal group, being seen as incompetent, careless, or unreliable could genuinely threaten your access to resources, alliances, and protection. A mind that treated every visible mistake as a potential reputational emergency was, in that world, being appropriately cautious rather than irrationally anxious. The problem is that modern life multiplies the number of small, low-stakes social moments you experience by an enormous factor, while the machinery evaluating each one hasn't recalibrated for that scale. You now generate hundreds of tiny reputational alarms a week, in meetings, in texts, in passing interactions, and each one still gets processed with the same intensity that was once reserved for genuinely consequential tribal moments. There's also a simple mathematical reason the spotlight effect persists so stubbornly, and it has nothing to do with anxiety at all. You have exactly one archive of your own mistakes, and it's complete. Every awkward sentence, every typo, every moment you said the wrong name is filed and retrievable in a single continuous record that belongs entirely to you. No one else has access to that archive, and crucially, no one else is building an equivalent archive of you specifically. They're building their own personal archive of their own mistakes, which is just as complete and just as invisible to you. You're comparing your total, uncensored footage to everyone else's brief, half-attentive highlight reel of you, and the footage will always look worse because it's the only version that includes everything. Which means the discomfort you feel after a mistake isn't measuring how bad the mistake actually was. It's measuring the difference between total information and partial information. A gap that exists for every single person in every single room, all of them simultaneously convinced they're the exception. Once you know this, the sidewalk stumble stops being evidence of anything except the structure of attention itself. Nobody is running a tally on you. They're too busy compiling their own.